Hello and welcome to West Country Wanderings. Welcome to one in my canal series, but also in my Secrets of the Thames Severn Canal series. I'm here at Brimscombe, just outside the town of Stroud, here in the county of Gloucestershire. I'm starting off here at Brimscombe, just a couple of miles to the southeast of the town of Stroud, here in the county of Gloucestershire. This here was once Brimscombe Port. It's hard to imagine now. This was the centre of the Thames Severn Canal's operations. This here behind me is the sole survivor structure of all the buildings that were once here. Now this is actually what is known as the salt store. Salt actually came down the canals from Droitwich Spal, just up there, a little way in Worcestershire. And there was an island in the centre of here which was used to store coal. Why on an island? Well, it was on the island to stop pilfering because it could be secured with having water on both sides of it. Unfortunately, the whole lot was infilled in the 1960s and all of the buildings demolished to make way for new factory spaces. Sadly though, there are plans to restore it. I'll say sadly because those plans for restoration have been stalled many times. We've been talking about this on the companion series looking at the restoration of the Cotswold canals. We want an update on that, a short update coming up very soon as well. So look out for that over the next few days. But they have stalled. There's been problems with developers going bankrupt, developers have been taken over by American companies, then them pulling out. Yeah, it's been toing and froing, really frustrating. It's been going on for many, many years. But there are plans to completely restore this site and put the canal back in along here. But the Brimscombe port isn't our secret of the Thames and Severn Canal, because it's not much of a secret. I think people in this area, and if you know about the history of the Thames and Severn Canal, you will know about the importance of Brimscombe port, because it was a transshipment point because of the difference in the gauges between the River Severn, the Severn Trows, and the Thames barges. So we'll be looking at that, and we have a little bit further on here at a place called Bourn, a hybrid lock which was built to take both. But you were probably thinking, if this was the transshipment point here, why did there need to be a hybrid lock a bit further to the east, further towards the Thames, not further towards the River Severn? Well, therein lies our secret here on the amazing Thames and Severn Canal. It's some attractive cottages by the River Frome, which is just over that bridge there. The canal itself and the port is immediately behind me, but if I spin round, you won't see anything, nothing very interesting. Yes, there we go. Just giant slabs of concrete everywhere. Part of it still used as a car park. That's the main A419 road between Stroud and Cirencester here in Gloucestershire. Now, because the canal was infilled here, we need to walk down this lane, which runs parallel very attractively next to the River Frome, which is just there, because, well, there is no canal until we get to a place called Bourne, which is a fascinating area with much history, industrial history here in Gloucestershire. Now, from here on in, things get a lot more attractive and a lot more interesting. That there is our River Frome, flowing slowly, languidly, I think is the word, isn't it? To the west, to it meets up with the River Severn, near Saw Junction. There you can just see some fish in it. It's attractive with the autumn leaves, isn't it? The wall on the left here is the original Thames and Severn wall from Brimscombe Port when it was in operation. It's actually a famous archway, a little bit round the corner there, so I'll show you that first. Now, along this section of the River Frome, it's really quite attractive, and it ends with the mill. A couple of mill buildings. I'll tell you a little bit more about that when we get there. There's also a cafe there now called Felt, and there's a very good reason why the cafe is named Felt. So that's our mill just coming up there. And the mill originally dates long before the Thames and Severn Canal was built, around the 1500s, and it may have been called Harris Mill, which links into our T&S story, but later became known as Bourne Mill. And over there, popping into view, you should be able to make out the arches of the Bourne Viaduct, or the Brimscombe Viaduct. So you have here the A419, the canal, although it's infilled at this point, river and railway, all pretty close to each other, following the valley here. So this is the famous arch here. This is the wall. Some of the workers that are working in the port would have entered through here into Brimscombe port. Now our canal starts to appear this point here. There, it's a bit weedy and reedy, but you can see where it's infilled. So there's the canal, and then to the left of that, no canal. Infilled, as I say, in the 1960s to make way for those factories, which are now no longer there. The arch was actually restored by volunteers of the Cotswold Canals Trust in 2008. Now the name of this attractive humpback bridge over the Thames Severn Canal is a little bit confusing. Now some people refer to it as Bourne Bridge, but more accurately it should be referred to as Bourne Lock Bridge, because obviously there's a lock on the other side, Bourne Lock. It's got two other names, I'll tell you about those in a minute, because Bourne Bridge was a little bit further on, which has now been levelled, and that's an interesting site unto itself, so we'll head there in a little bit. But let's go on to the bridge to show this and tell you a little bit more about this fascinating site. There is so much history in this area, I'm only able to scratch the surface of it today. We're now on Bourne Lock Bridge, and you can see the two surviving mill buildings here. A lot of these here date from the 1850s though, not certainly back to the 1500s when Bourne Mill was first in inception. It's been used for lots of different things, mainly to do with textiles, of course, water being powered from the River Frome. And actually the River Frome was rerouted here, so we're standing on the canal here. I'll insert an old OS map now so it becomes a lot clearer, and it was reverted back there where the viaduct or the railway is now. Of course that wasn't built when the mills here was in full operation. It's the eastern side of Bourne Bridge, or Lock Bridge, shall I say, Bourne Lock Bridge, and there is the lock itself, which is part of our Secret of the Thames Severn Canal story today, although not the lock itself, but why it was built to these dimensions, because it is a hybrid lock able to take both Severn Trows and Thames barges to the east of Brimscombe port, which is a transshipment point. But why? Well, I'll tell you about that shortly. Well, as well as being known as Harris Mill, when it first opened, it was also known as Grimes Mill, and it was producing textiles as early as 1608. It was later a factory for Hardwick and Harmer around 1827. Towards the end of the 19th century, Richard Grist moved in, and they made mattresses. Later on, the mill buildings were used by a company called Hack, H&S Hack, or T&S Hack sometimes described, depending which source you look at, and they manufactured umbrellas, umbrella sticks, and walking sticks. A strange combination, I thought, yeah, but there's a little bit of history of making walking sticks in the area, both the Stroud valleys and the village of Chalford, a bit further to the east. So yeah, this lock was known as Bourne Lock, but also Harris Lock, and also Hack Lock, because of the aforementioned manufacture of those sticks. Now the building that's just coming into view now with the seat in front of it, I don't believe has any connection to the Thames Severn Canal. I did a recce here the other day and I thought, that looks like a canal side, maybe a wharfinger building there, lockkeeper perhaps, but it doesn't appear on the 1887 Ordnance Survey map next to the canal. So I think it's related to the mill rather than the operation of the canal itself. Now let's have a look a little bit at this lock. Now as you can see, this lock is exceedingly long. It's actually 90 foot long and it's 16 feet wide, and as I say, it is known as a hybrid lock to get both trows and barges in. We got those a bit further up. Well, they tended to be obviously for the Severn Trows on the Stroud water and the Thames barges beyond this towards Inglesham and Lexlade, but here they needed to be able to take both for a very good reason. There's something that once was on the other side of the viaduct. So to tell you about that part of the story, we need to go on the opposite side of the canal, follow the towpath and go underneath the railway line, and we'll do that after this short break. Well, welcome back. I'm now alongside that curious building here, which looks like it's been restored and was probably used as a store in connection with our Bourne mill that's behind us. This here is the Bourne lock again, just down here. As I say, we're on the other side of it now. That's the roadside over there, and there is Bourne Lock Bridge. And I'll show you the other Bourne bridge, or where it was, later on. But we need to follow the towpath and go underneath the railway line. That's the line between Gloucester and Swindon, which was constructed obviously around the middle part of the 19th century, courtesy of Mr. Brunel, Isambard Kingdom Brunel. And obviously he wanted to connect Cheltenham up to London. That's not the story for today though. Later on, at some point, they needed to change something here though. And I'll show you that because it's quite curious. And I don't really have the answer as to why it was done the way it was done. But let's have a look at this because it's a little bit fascinating. And I'd love your input. So if you're watching this and you know a little bit more about this particular bit here, please drop a comment below. So let's have a look. So there's our mill again. That's Bourne Mill. The Thames Severn Canal is behind me. This is the Gloucester to Swindon railway line. Gloucester on the right, Swindon on the left, or rather, I should say Stroud. Stroud's the next station on the right, Kemble the next one on the left. Here, I think, is an original Thames Severn Canal wall, which is great to have that there. Now, our canal and the tail of the lock is here, so this is Bourne Lock here. And obviously our canal, when the railway was built, because obviously the canal was built before the railway, when they built the railway, they needed to get it over the canal, and they did that using an iron girder bridge, and the location of that was somewhere around there. I've not been able to find a photograph of it. I've been hunting and hunting and hunting, and at some point, I am assuming in the 20th century, although I cannot be certain because obviously there were closures, the Thames Severn Canal closed in stages. I would imagine though it was post-closure, and I'm thinking probably post-1930s. The canal was diverted into a culvert and effectively into an unglorious pipe and into this little channel here underneath the railway, and the iron girder bridge which carried the railway over the Thames Severn Canal was removed, and then the towpath was moved slightly to the right, taking it under one of the arches of Brimscombe viaduct. So there's the canal. Well, any water that's flowing it goes through there, but obviously you couldn't get a Thames barge or a Severn trow underneath there today. Well, let's follow it here and let's go through this archway of the viaduct and see what we've got on the other side, because that's the heart of our Secret of the Thames Severn story today. We're now on the other side of the railway tracks, having going underneath the viaduct there. And this is where any water comes through, although for some reason it's actually been blocked off, as well as been narrowed by putting in the Armco pipe. It's got that breeze blocks there. There is a little sluice to take out any excess water. The fact the canal bed here looks dry all along there. We'll have a look at that in a bit more detail because that's part of our story. And despite the fact we've had very heavy rain for the past few days, But down here, there's obviously a sluice down there, I can't see it, but if you look down here on the River Frome, which is at a lower level, so obviously the canal's at the higher level to the river to follow the contour of the land, is there. So where you can see that little bit of concrete, there's another pipe there which takes out any excess water from the canal and dumps it into the waters of the River Frome, although there's no flow through that pipe, and I just had a quick look down there and there's nothing flowing through it. Now, you may be asking yourself at this point, where we've got the Thames Severn Canal, we're looking in the direction of Chalford and the portal, the Sapperton portal of the tunnel there, near the village of Sapperton, which was our last Thames and Secrets of the Severn Canal. It's wide. You'll notice here, the canal here is very, very wide. Now, there's a really good reason for that. If we go just a little bit further, and I will now need to put in the OS map so this all makes sense. Now, over there now we have a factory, a large factory. At one time it was known as Olympic Varnishers, and I think it was known as a dispersal project from the early 1940s and the Second World War, so it may have been a shadow factory. They had one in the east of London, I believe, and they brought the Olympic Varnishers to here in the early 1940s. That was there. It's no longer Olympic Varnishers, it's now a company called Pangolin Editions, and they have another factory in nearby Chalford, and they make sculptings. Yes, huge ones, and then they spray them, and yeah, it's really interesting. I'll link to Pangolin. Far too much for me to describe here on this Thames and Severn Canal video, but I'll link to that, their website, in the description of today's video if you're interested in that. So here's our canal, very wide. Now this is where you'll need to have quite a bit of imagination, because in the bank of the canal along here, there would have been two cutaways going off at 90 degrees to the line of the canal in where the factory is now. You can't make out anything today because it has been all infilled and the factory has been rebuilt there. According to a gentleman called Humphrey Household, has written the Bible on the Thames and Severn Canal, you could see them up to, I would estimate, probably 40 years or so ago, but literally nothing there to see today. But when you insert the OS map, it all becomes clear, because there were once two dry docks in there. But why? This site here at Brimscombe, as well as being the port a bit further there, important headquarters of the Thames and Severn Canal, was also the Thames and Severn Canal's main boatyard. So it was here, right there, where those factory buildings are today. It started off quite small. It actually opened at the time that the canal opened here, because the proprietors of the Thames Severn Canal realised they needed to have trows and barges to be able to move goods as a proper company along the sections of not only the canal but also the Stroud water, the River Severn and the River Thames, and a couple of other canals as well. So they needed to build trows and barges. But where to do that? Well, they wanted to do it near the port, but the port was already busy with freight, but they wanted to build it nearby. Now that, of course, is why we had our hybrid lock, and it all happened here at Brimscombe, just near Bourne Mill and Bourne Lock. It's a fascinating story, though, about the boatyard itself. Now, initially, the boats here at Bourne Yard were built in the open. Then they added the first dry dock, and as I understand it, they then put a cover on that dry dock. It goes on to describe a blacksmith and his assistant and something called two journeymen. Now, I'm not sure what that is. Potentially it could be that they were people that would obviously go on the boats, maybe to test them out initially on the section of the Thames and Severn Canal. Now, in terms of the fleet for the Thames and Severn Canal, they actually had 171 men, probably all men. There may have been one or two women in there. I don't want to be sexist about these matters, but in those days it probably was all men. And they went up as far as the basin at Starrowport, there, which we've seen before, on the Staffs and Worcester Canal, just off the River Severn, and down as far as Bristol, and across as far as Lechlade, although I think also I've heard that they went across to Wallingford on the Thames as well, so kind of all points north, south and to the east here. So yeah, they would take that, and they also later made sails here as well. So you've got the rope, and they had to equip them so they could go on both the River Severn and on the River Thames. So quite an interesting boatyard here, and a really important one for the Thames and Severn Company here in Gloucestershire. Randomly, I know this isn't a lost railway walk, but randomly by this time side of the towpath here, the Thames and Severn Canal, there's our canal again there. There is a rail there. Why that's there, I have absolutely no idea. Now, if you fancy sticking around after the break here on the secrets of the Thames and Severn Canal, I'll show you the site of Bourne Bridge and Brimscombe Gasworks and Brimscombe Railway Station, and also a very interesting railway bridge I've not ever seen the likes of before. So I don't know what you're going to make of that, but if you're interested in that, I'll see you in part 3 in a few moments. So this is back to our river again, the River Froome. As I say, it's in quite a bit of a curve at this point, and this was been the location of Dark Mill, although I'm not aware that there's any remains of it these days. But through here, this gate, which is still here but pinned in an opened back position, are the remains of a factory. Now, in around 1895, a company set up business here at Dark Mill, and one of them was a gentleman called Critchley, who I believe came from the London area, and he set up a business making bone needles. And yes, Critchley's, this is the remains of the factory of Critchley's. Now, if you talk to anybody more senior in the Stroud Valleys, they will have heard of this factory here, because at one time it employed a lot of people here in the Stroud Valleys. It kind of got adapted because there was something invented in the Stroud Valleys called aeronoid, which was a plastic compound, and going from bone to needles, presumably things like knitting needles for wool. They would have been made with this new plastic compound, and that was then moved to another factory at Dubbridge, and that later was taken over by British Petroleum, yes, BP. But this is the remains of the original factory site here at Critchley's at Dark Mill. Quite an extensive place. But now I'm not going to enter there because the roof has completely collapsed, and because we've had the rain, we've got the water sitting there on the floor of what was Critchley's factory. This is still the Critchley factory site here. That's the one that made pins and needles and other bits and bobs really, and I say later became aeronoids, and this would have been one of their entrances. We've got one of their arches here. It's all kind of graffitied up. Sorry about the noise. The factory, that's the Pangolin factory I was talking about, that makes all of those sculptings for art. Yeah, so that would have been one of the entrances there. So I love that door there, though, yeah, all boarded up now, so stop you going in there. There was another factory on this site in the 1990s. It was an electronic company. I think they were just called UK Electronics, but I don't think they hanged around for very long. You can actually see part of their sign in a moment as we approach the location of Bourne Bridge. Yeah, hence the confusion. The bridge was taken out when the factory expanded because obviously they didn't want the humpback and heavy lorries. Oh, we can see some gearing down here and the smell of diesel oil. So I'm not sure what all that is about, why that would be there like that, but that's what you expect in old industrial plants here. We've got some old pipes in there, got some old sleepers in there, yeah, everything going on, and quite a derelict site. So Brimscombe is actually a very, very industrial area. Think of the Cotswolds being very rural, very rustic, very agricultural. Not so in the Stroud Valleys. Let's continue along here to the site of Bourne Bridge. So here's our Thames and Severn Canal again. Again, not much water in it, bit of a flow there. And that looks like the original brickwork on the opposite side there. It's a little bit dark, I guess, but that's the original brickwork of when the Thames and Severn was constructed. And here you also notice it's still quite wide. I think it narrowed the other side of Bourne Bridge so they could actually moor up those trows and barges that had been built in the boatyard before heading them further to the west. But yeah, good to see that brick there. And obviously they removed one of the bricks to get the flow of water. That gap there would obviously not been in there when the canal was in operation. So we're going to continue through here, and this is the bit where Bourne Bridge would have once been. I'll see if I can find an old photograph of Bourne Bridge. But today there is sort of a bridge, but taken out, as I say, quite some years ago, probably 40s, maybe 1940s. I'm not too sure, because you just tell by the brickwork that's not a 60s construction down there. That definitely looks 40s. So that's our canal going through those twin tunnels down under there, and we come to this location, which is, it's not pretty, but I think it's quite interesting. So Bourne Bridge, Humpback Bridge, would have been here, this location over the Thames and Severn Canal. I'm going to show that other bit because that'll give away what I'm going to show you next. And here is something quite interesting indeed, I think you'll find. Oh, that's where it says GB Electronics, the manufacturers. So this would have been an entrance to Critchley's as well originally. That's the gates for it through there. So that would have been here. And we have this side here, which does require quite a bit, I think, of explanation, because you're probably thinking, what on earth is going on here? Yes, well, there was another mill here called Wimborne Mill, and that was also occupied at one time by our Critchley's company. So that was a bit further over there. Later on, Wimborne Mill was demolished. The factory site became the gasworks, Brimscombe Gasworks, just going over our River Froome again. And the whole site became derelict. Now, a few years ago, they were going to build a new housing development here called Wimborne, named after, of course, the aforementioned mill that was once here, and of course on the site of Brimscombe Gasworks. And as you can see, they even put in a new footbridge here over the River Froome. But I believe the builders went bankrupt, and as you can see, nothing further apart from a few footholds. I think that's what they call foundations have been built, but not a lot else. And everything, the whole site, there's even like portaloos still there, and cones and pipes. It's all been completely abandoned. And we're looking back at the site of Bourne Bridge over the Thames and Severn Canal, and here is our canal following along the Golden Valley, making its way in the direction of Chelford and then to the Supperton Tunnel, which we saw earlier in the previous video. So this is Pangolin Editions here, which, as I say, was Olympic varnish. And here would have once been the site of Brimscombe railway station, but sadly there is no remains of it to be seen. Very attractive station, and there are quite a few photographs of it, so I'm going to insert those photographs of Brimscombe station now. So it would have been up here on the left of this bridge, this curious bridge, which is kind of the last thing I'll show you today, here on this Thames and Severn Canal, secrets of the Thames and Severn Canal. Excuse the noise of the fans and everything in the factory. But yeah, so it would have been up there on the embankment of the railway. Now you'll notice that this bridge is incredibly wide. So you've got two railway tracks above, but you haven't just got two railway tracks, because obviously if it's just two railway tracks, why would the bridge be so incredibly long? Well, because it's not just carrying two railway tracks, it's actually carrying the main road as well. So when the GWR put the railway in here between Gloucester and Swindon, they were also in effect building a road bridge at the same time. Now, I have no idea how the finance of that was worked out between the GWR and presumably the local authority to widen the road between Stroud, Chelford and Cirencester, but that's what happened. It's actually called Toadsmore Bridge because this road takes you into the Toadsmore Valley. And so the other side of the bridge takes you to this, which was the site of Lewison Mill. Well, the mill's still here, as you can see. Another textile mill here in the Stroud valleys, and it has been now converted into apartments, very tastefully done. Also got some office space alongside it as well. We're back now at Bourne Lock and Bourne Lock Bridge by the wonderful Bourne Mill here on the Thames Severn Canal. Hope you enjoyed this shorter Secrets of the Thames Severn Canal here on West Country Wanderings. There'll be another one in my Secrets of the Stroud Water Canal coming up. I'm also hoping to look at another section of the Wilts and Berks Canal as well, because a towpath of that has reopened recently. So I hope to explore that in the county of Wiltshire. And also look out for the update on the Thames Severn and Stroud Water Canals, aka the Cotswold Canals. All the exciting developments on that. Be a shorter one, and then there'll be a longer one update landing early spring next year. That's it for now. Take care of yourselves, look out for yourselves, and I hope to see you on the channel again very soon. All the best. Bye bye.